Presented by PrizePicks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first dollars and you use the promo code. Welcome to Light Years. Tommy Gunn, fire everybody. No.
Sam Kawakami coming out of the gate.
All right, Warriors lose to the Denver Nuggets feels like, I could take this a few ways. On the one hand, they were due for a game like this.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, Timberwolves lost tonight. Denver sat everyone. And you just can't throw a game like this away, particularly when Steph was questionable. He's dealing with, some lower back soreness, DNP old type of stuff. And you know what sucks is like right after the game, like, man, I wish they didn't play him. But you can obviously that's like the right afterwards feeling. It just makes it feel like such a fucking waste of time given how tactical they need to be moving forward.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that Jokic and Murray were out, I actually got a little bit worried because it's just such an obvious trap game situation. And game planning for Denver is a very specific thing just because Jokic is such a unique and great player. And so when he's out, everything changes. You know what I mean? Like Denver essentially played small ball all game. And obviously Aaron Gordon was phenomenal. That's one of the best games I've ever seen him play. He was incredible all night. And it felt like every time Denver needed to hit a timely shot or get like a big rebound or a loose ball, they came up with the play. You know what I mean? It was just one of those nights. Like the Jalen Pickett shot that barely grazed the rim. They end up getting the possession after the refs conversate and they score a bucket. And it just felt like plays every time the Warriors would claw back. It felt like a play like that would happen. And obviously there's not much encouraging about that game, but the little fourth quarter stretch where they really turned it up defensively, I wish they would have been able to complete the job. Obviously they cut it to 3, but it feels like they can turn the defense up again when they need to, which is an encouraging sign. But at the end of the day, you can't blow that fucking game. It was handed to you on a platter, and then you lose by 9, and Russ and AG kind of kick your ass.
Just so many things you can point out on the Warriors side. Starting slow, kind of a lazy start, letting Denver get life off the bat. Like you said, just quintessential trap game. You could feel the energy when they came out there like, oh, no Jokic. We can just kind of flow through the motions and win this immediately or win this when we need to win it. And it was everything. Missed free throws. Probably not the top reason they lost the game, but it'd be nice. It'd have been nice to have what they end up taking here. Yeah. 15 for 27 from the line would have been nice to make your free throws a little bit. Jimmy, who's been shooting 90% from the free throw line, just had the classic regression game where he misses a few. He's still going to end the season 85% type of thing down the line. And then turnovers were the other thing. I just felt like every time they got back into it, Denver would hit a bullshit shot and then they would follow it up with a BS turnover. And some of those were Steph errant passes, but there were like moving screens. It was just not crisp. Again, maybe they were due for this type of game. And, because what are they, 15-2 coming into this or 14-2 coming into this with Jimmy?
Mm-hmm.
It's not 14-3. The sky is falling. They're an awful team now. But it just sucks. It's particularly with Minnesota losing tonight. And have you looked at Minnesota's schedule?
It's one of the easiest in the league. It's actually, I want to say, I looked at the strength of schedule the other day. I want to say it's 28th out of 30 in terms of strength of remaining schedule. And that's obviously one of the easier in the league.
The Warriors have had a pretty cake schedule on this run. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, Minnesota's is just as, if not easier, if not just by virtue of like, you get the Spurs without Wemby, you get the Pelicans who are in pure tank, you get some of these things. And it's just, coming into this game, when I saw they were sitting those guys, I'm like, ooh, they can get within 2. Denver's going to lose. They're 2 games back and they get up to the 2 seed. And, kind of it's the reality check you need a little bit, which is when you start the season 25-26, it's hard to make up enough ground to get that high. And I think we've said all year or since the trade, get to the 6 seed, 5 seed. That's a pretty good accomplishment. And honestly, that's probably what it's going to be for this team. They're probably not going to be able to get higher than that.
They would have had to be perfect to climb into that top 4. And it did feel distinctly possible for a little bit to do that. But at the end of the day, you got to be perfect to do that. And obviously that was probably one of their worst games, if not the worst game since the Jimmy trade, with Jimmy actually being in the lineup. Because the one of the 3 losses is without Jimmy in Philly. Quentin Grimes goes for 44, whatever happened. But yeah, it's a missed opportunity, so it's disappointing. But I mean, big picture wise, I don't think I've really change my thoughts too much. Like I'm interested to see what they look like against Milwaukee tomorrow. I was honestly disappointed when Murray and Jokic were out because it's like I was viewing this game as like a test of like, okay, where are they really at against a real contender? And then they don't play and like you lose. But I don't know how much you can really take from this game aside from the fact that they were just sloppy. I mean, Steph had his classic just fucking out to lunch game where he just throwing the ball all over the yard, horrendous turnovers. And I think some of that's probably the injury. You know what I mean? Like he's not moving probably as sharp or as quickly as he wants. And then you couple that with him just being, I mean, as lazy as we've seen him in weeks, really since the trade. That's probably the laziest performance we've seen from him. And then it all just snowballs from there. Then everybody else starts to get sloppy and they just threw the ball over the yard. And it's not like Denver didn't. They forced 22 turnovers, or maybe it might have been 23 by the end of the game. So that the defense was good enough in spurts to give Denver issues, but Denver also just made a lot of really tough shots and made plays when they needed to.
I mean, the obvious thing is they should have just sat Steph. Well, hindsight's 2020. If they were going to come out like this and just basically throw the game away, like, yes, they should have sat him, particularly when you saw how he looked. He's looking a little gassed. He looks like he used him. I'm going to ask you the question going forward. Do they sit him tomorrow against Milwaukee? It sucks to even have to think about that in context of losing tonight's game. Like, you would have hoped they win tonight. And then if you look this gas, you're like, you know what? We're going to do it. But now, I don't know.
Now you can't sit him. Now you can't sit him, in my opinion, because I mean, like you said, thankfully Minnesota lost tonight, and I think the Grizzlies lost as well, so they'll fall back a little bit in the standings. But like Houston should have lost; they were up 20, or they were down 25 to the Sixers, and they ended up coming back and winning. So like the West is just. I want to say before tonight, the Wolves were on an 8-game winning streak. The Warriors were on a 7-game winning streak. And I think Houston just extended their winning streak to 7. So it's like none of these teams are losing. You can't really afford to just throw games away, especially when you take a loss like this at home against a team that's depleted, that doesn't have 4 of their top 7, 8 guys.
Do you really view tonight's loss just as a focus thing, or do you think there were bigger issues? Like, are they coming back to earth? Is there something structural that we need to worry about with this team?
I mean, I think the Kuminga stuff has been a little bit clunky the last couple games. Like I thought he was actually pretty solid tonight. His defensive energy in the fourth quarter was very, very helpful. But only 4 of 11 from the field. I think they're just kind of trying to like figure it out. And I think we kind of knew this was coming. Like it wasn't going to necessarily be the cleanest fit. But at the end of the day, they need him to achieve their highest ceiling. So it was expected that growing pains come in. And the interesting thing to me is like, how do they respond going forward? Like, does this, start a little bit of a slide, or are they able to bounce back next game, or, on the road trip that they have coming up and just kind of sustain the level? But I don't, it doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't raise many big picture questions for me. And maybe that's just me being optimistic, looking at a glass half full. But there was nothing I saw tonight besides sloppiness. I mean, 20 turnovers. Like at the end of the day, that's just them being sloppy and lazy and, playing against a team that they thought they were going to walk all over because Jokic was out. But that obviously wasn't the case. So there wasn't anything to me that stood out as like, oh, that's an unfixable problem going forward. Just better focus and effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I am getting a little concerned about Steph. I'm not going to lie. I'm wondering if it is time to sit him a game and just kind of like live with the fact that, like, yeah, man, you might lose a game, but your ceiling is non-existent if he is, in bubble wrap, like, the ice on the knees, heat on the back, like everything going that whole way. Like, is it smarter to just kind of piecemeal this and just kind of try to keep him as fresh as possible when you get to it? Because they're going to make the playoffs. They are going to make the playoffs, and it's a real question of avoiding the play-in versus the not right now. But I don't know if that's just me overreacting to tonight's game. So what I'm really trying to process right now is how much of that is tonight he looked awful versus he might need, a couple games off here and there, because right now he's also pacing towards 70 plus games again, which is an unfathomable load for a guy who's turned 37 a few days ago,
Yeah, I mean, especially when you consider that the first 50 games of that is him really having to do heavy lifting from an offensive standpoint. And Kerr apparently just said in his presser, shout out Mike in the chat. Curtis said in his presser that Curry is exhausted. Possible he sits tomorrow. So, I mean, it sounds like they might do it, but my argument would be okay. Like, obviously, if he's exhausted and his back's messed up, like don't play him. Like, it's not worth like risking something bigger or like hurting him long term. But at the same time, that week off would be really nice if you can be a top 6 seed. Be really nice to not have to be in the play-in. So it's kind of like 6 to 1, half dozen the other type of situation in terms of where I'd land on resting him versus playing him, because they need to bank every single win they can get with the way that not only Minnesota's schedule is, but Houston has a pretty easy schedule too down the stretch from what I remember. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, they need to bank as many wins as possible. Obviously, Milwaukee's kind of a toss-up game regardless of who plays and who doesn't, and obviously it gets tougher without Steph. But yeah, they have an easier road trip coming up, so I guess you could look at it as, you throw this Milwaukee game and then you gear up for, essentially Toronto to end the homestand, and then you get 4 or 5 easy games on the road and you just take care of business there. But I can hear the argument either way, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they were so hot coming into this game where everything felt possible. And I feel like this is kind of like the slap in the face of, all right, they do have an older team. They are going to have to manage this down the stretch. They could finish the season very strongly, make the playoffs and everything, but, winning, let's call it, 25, 26 of 31 with Jimmy was always a little bit of like, optimist, like getting just a little too excited with everything we're seeing. So it sucks, but it is what it is. It's going to get tougher. And what matters is this team is healthy in a month's time when the playoffs start.
Yeah, I mean the kind of the negative or like the pessimist argument would be, the honeymoon phase is quote unquote over. Not that like the locker room's, gone awry or whatever, but just in terms of like kind of that high that you're riding post trade, you could argue that might be gone now. And now they kind of have to just like play basketball without kind of that extra juice that they got from the trade. So that would be kind of the pessimist view. But I mean, I still think if they can beat Milwaukee tomorrow, they got 4, like I said, they got 4 or 5 easy games in a row. So you could ride this to being like, 20-3 with Jimmy, because it's like it's Raptors, then like Hawks, Spurs, Pelicans. Like it's a very, very weak road trip that they have coming up. And those games are on the road, so they will be tough regardless, probably, just in terms of, fatigue level and exhaustion. But I mean, they really could extend it to something pretty nice here, but I don't know. Let's see if Steph plays tomorrow, first of all, and then let's see, how exhausted their older guys are. Because you could definitely see Steph being tired. I thought Dre was pretty good tonight. Jimmy, I think we can hit on this later, but we got a little bit of a sneak peek of like the way Jimmy's effort level will raise in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like you could see it in that second half, especially when they were making the comeback. It's like, oh, he's like being very intentional about getting to the rim. He's being more aggressive hunting his shots. He's diving on the floor for loose balls. And most nights he just doesn't do that. He's 35 years old and it's the regular season. But I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, okay, people have been, I think, a little bit worried about his scoring at times. Like, oh, he only had 11 points tonight. He impacts the game in so many ways. But he had 23 tonight, 8 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, 1 block. Like he was excellent. And they stay in that game essentially because of him, because Steph just didn't have it. I thought Draymond was fantastic defensively, 4 blocks, 3 steals, kind of a vintage Draymond performance on that end. So it was really Jimmy and Dre keeping them in the game. But it was so nice to see, if Steph has a bad game, it's not just going to be a blowout. Like they stayed in that game because Jimmy and Dre were excellent. But yeah, I thought it was just kind of like interesting and cool to see that from Jimmy in a moment where they needed it, because that's what it's going to be like in, a couple games every playoff series.
And I think it kind of goes both ways on it, because to me, like the more I'm processing this, the more it really is like, look, if they get like a B Steph performance, they win. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. They got what they hadn't had in terms of a second star. Like, and Jimmy doesn't do it in terms of like, I'm going to, ISO and like, just, get the team back into it. Like I'm Kevin Durant. He does it by making a variety of different plays. Like you said, there was a block in the third quarter that he had that I thought ignited the run. They were down maybe 10 at that point, and that was like kind of the push that got them right to a single possession game. Fitz was ready to explode. It was super exciting, that sort of thing. And those are typically the moments where it's like, okay, Steph hits a shot, takes us home, and then the momentum builds, and he just didn't have it tonight. And that's kind of what it is. So it's like, I'm watching this team. I'm like, yeah, they're set up well. If you get Steph, if you get a Steph performance, they win this game every time. And it just didn't happen. And it's okay. It happens, but it's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, like I mean, that's obviously a frustrating loss, and like I know, I'm not happy about it, but it doesn't feel like early season losses where you're just like, where is the upside here? Or like, where is there any positives to look at? I thought, despite the fact that they lost, like I said, Jimmy was a positive. Draymond looked fantastic. GP continues to play well. Kuminga had some really nice moments. Like, there are still things to take from that performance, in my opinion. So it's just, I could get on here and rant and rave and act like the sky is falling, but that's just not how I feel, And so
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, I think they're fine. I'm interested to see how they respond to really probably the first like genuinely bad loss of the Jimmy era. Like the Dallas game was weird because Kyrie just went absolutely bananas.
And it was like his second or third game.
Yep.
It was expected.
Yeah, and Philly, obviously, Grimes just had like an all-time performance, even though he had 46 tonight. So apparently this is just who he is now. And then tonight, AG went off. So like that's not necessarily a normal thing, but it was more just like the effort and the focus and like the attention to detail just wasn't there from the beginning of the game. And I think that's the first time we've seen that for an entire 48 minutes of the Jimmy era. So it just comes down to that to me. Like, I'm not going to sit here and freak out because they gave shitty effort.
If we see this 3 of the next 5 games, then we have something to talk about. But considering how well they've played coming into this game, I'm willing to write it off as exhaustion, kind of coming in flat, like taking, feeling yourself a little too much. Everything's been going a little too easy and just having a bad game. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's talk some prize picks, huh? I got absolutely crushed today because I went heavy on Steph props. I don't know what motivated me to do that with. I don't know what motivated me to do that with
Steph.
All the
Steph
back
motivates
stuff.
you to do that when he's
right.
When things are going well. You're like, well, here comes another 40.
Yeah, and the thing was, I had Jimmy on my ticket. I had Jimmy points, rebounds, and assists on my ticket. So I mean, that went really well. But Steph just probably his worst game of the Jimmy era, just in terms of like when they need a performance, and he just didn't have it tonight, and that really hasn't been the case since the Jimmy trade. But yeah. All right. Light Years Podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. So download the app today and use code LIGHTYEARS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly when you play your first $5. PrizePicks, run your game.
You know what I will say? It's frustrating when the Warriors lose, but it's nice to have a Surfside. Our sponsor, our new sponsor here, new to the West Coast, guys. You guys can pick up Surfside, Costco, Target, Rayleigh's, select retailers all across Northern California, but I would definitely recommend going to Costco, get an 18-pack. Very good price on that front. 100 calories. I'd say 100 points for the Warriors. Typically gets it done, but maybe not tonight. But, 100 calories, 100 points. We'll take it that way. No bubbles, no troubles. Well, there were some troubles tonight, but no. But seriously, guys, one of the best drinks I've ever had. 100 calories, so helps me stay in shape. You guys know I'm trying to get myself back into shape, trying to get a little leaner, feel a little better. Summer coming around, trying to look good poolside, all those sort of things. Yeah, guys, check out Surfside.
I've been drinking Surfsides for a while now. They've had them down in SoCal.
I know you guys got them like a good 6 to 12 months before us. I've been a little jealous of you, not gonna lie.
Yeah, they had them like last summer. So I was drinking them at the beach all last summer. Like some of the there's like this local thing called Circuit here that's like a mini version of Uber essentially, and they've been like advertising on the side of those for a long time. So yeah, I've been heavy in the Surfside game for a while. They're fantastic.
Yeah. Should we talk Kuminga? Let's talk Kuminga real quick.
Sure. Yeah.
So I feel like this isn't necessarily the game to overreact in any direction, but I'm still trying to figure out how they necessarily want to fit him in to his lineup. And so I'll let you take the floor on Kuminga here, because through 3 games, here's my overarching take on it. I do feel like he's bought into his role. I do feel like he's trying to fit into everything they're doing. He is giving them a downhill scoring threat in athleticism, which they desperately need, particularly on nights like tonight, particularly on nights where Steph looks old. It is nice to have a young guy to just throw the ball to. That stretch where they're making a run in the third quarter, he got the ball a couple times in post, made some key plays there. And that was nice. Like you could see the vision of how he can be another player who carries the load of the offense, allows Steph to, I don't want to say rest, but just not have to like play every minute like it matters. But at the same time, spacing issue. I feel like this is the first game where is really like, man, they just really have no outside shooting. You have him there. Him and Jimmy kind of want to operate in the same space on the floor. Draymond also wants to operate in the same. Like all those guys kind of want to just operate in like the post down. It's a little tricky.
Definitely a little tricky. I mean, they went I want to say 8 for 33 from 3 tonight, and some of that is just missing open looks. You know what I mean? But some of it is not having enough shooting on the floor. I definitely think he's bought into his role. I'm actually not worried about that at all. He's like trying to move the ball. He's trying to play within the flow. I thought his on ball defense can wax and wane a little bit. He doesn't necessarily have the quickest lateral quickness. You know what I mean? Like he's not the quickest guy in those terms, and I think his hips are a little bit stiff to like truly be an elite point of attack defender. But I thought he did a really good job on Russ tonight, especially in the second half, fourth quarter. He really kind of ignited that run. In terms of just the defensive effort and energy. And I think a lot of it is just like, he's bought into this because like having Jimmy in the locker room, it's a new voice. Number one, like Jimmy really is a great leader when he's like bought into doing that, when he's not like trying to tank his entire situation at whatever given franchise he's at. And it's somebody that I think Kuminga can like respect from the standpoint of like, he's been there and that's who Kuminga like envisions himself as being, that type of player. And I think you can just tell how much Kuminga is like taking a liking to him. Like every time he's like asking him a question, he's like smiling. You know, they're constantly conversating. So I think that is gonna, more than almost anything else, I think that's gonna help Kuminga stay bought into this role. And I mean, it's warranted. Like Jimmy is obviously a much better player than Kuminga, so like he can't really like say anything. And they have other options they can go to. They can go to Gee. They can go to Gary, like Moses. So obviously, like I said earlier, you know, I think Kuminga is necessary for their playoff ceiling to like really get to where they want to go and win a championship. But at the same time, they definitely don't need him to win regular season games. You know what I mean? Like they've proven that already. So yeah, it was always going to be clunky. It was never going to be super smooth. But I do think the most important thing is that he's bought in and he's giving effort and attention to detail in the right areas. And so far he's doing that. So you just got to kind of look for like continual progress to be made. And hopefully the offense can start to like figure itself out here.
Yeah. The thing that also stands out to me tonight was they didn't really force turnovers the way they normally do. A lot of their, no.
Denver had 23 of them.
Mm.
I think it was just sloppiness from Denver.
Well, it was definitely sloppiness from Denver. I mean, it's sloppiness on both sides, let's be real. But I feel like they didn't really get out and run the way they normally do off of those, if that makes more sense. That's probably the better way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's another way in which Kuminga can really help them, which is just take advantage of that, get into transition, finish those plays. I don't know. The whole game, like, maybe we should talk about something else at this point. But going from it, it's just, it does feel like over-indexing an individual game at this point in my head. Maybe just recording it right afterwards. That might be what's going on right now. Little frustrations.
Yeah. No, like I said, there was no like big picture stuff outside of just like Kuminga trying to find his way and like figuring that whole situation out. But that's not like a change from the last game. And I didn't see anything that was like super red flaggy in terms of that. He's just, like you said, he wants to operate in the same areas as Jimmy. And in the same areas as Draymond. The spacing can definitely get a little bit clunky and weird when that's the case. But I don't know. I just didn't see any major red flags that like made me shift my entire belief in the team. You know, and like you said, if we see this similar type of effort over the next like week and a half, 2 weeks, then yeah, it's definitely a bigger conversation to be had. But at the end of the day, like you just got to focus. And I thought honestly, I mean, Kuminga's +6 tonight. He's the only guy on the team as a plus. I thought he probably was more locked in than anybody else on the team outside of Jimmy or Draymond.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there. You know who was missed? Pajemski.
Yeah.
Yep. I do actually feel like this is a game where they could have really used him. Just another ball handler out there, another guy who crashes the boards. If there's one thing I keep pointing to on this game, it's they did get out rebounded. It did feel like every loose ball went to Denver. And some of that's just the breaks of the game, but a lot of that was Denver played harder than them the entire way through. And you just wonder if Pods is out there, like you can never say he's not a guy who doesn't get every loose ball, helps him get a couple better shots. Does that change the momentum of the game?
Yeah, no, Denver definitely beat him up inside. It was just felt like every time they needed to get an offensive board, they did. But it also felt like one of those games where like the ball always just bounced the direction that Denver needed it to bounce. But at the end of the day, like Pods is one of their best rebounders, so when he's not out there, especially against a more physical, bigger opponent like Denver, it shows up. Like they do need his rebounding from his position. And it felt like they never had enough bodies involved in those situations. It just felt like they were always like a guy short in terms of like a loose ball would happen or a rebound would go up that they wouldn't get. But again, that's just effort and focus, right? Like that's not really, and obviously some personnel. It'd be nice to have Pods, like I said, but it wasn't. I don't know. We're talking in circles at this point, but like, but it's just like I don't think there's anything like major to take from tonight's performance outside of like just be better. Like you when your leaders are 35, 35, and 37, you shouldn't have this type of effort against an undermanned opponent, but they did.
Yeah. Yeah. It does make tomorrow's game against Milwaukee infinitely more interesting to me. Like Giannis is Giannis. He's great. But it's a good opponent. I don't know. I'm just excited at this point to see them keep going.
You think Steph plays?
I don't. That's my 10:30, little sleep deprived, little overreacting to him looking old and tired tonight take. I'll change my opinion maybe tomorrow, but just based off of what Steve just said and just knowing this team, I'm going to guess he doesn't play tomorrow. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if we don't get Steph, if Pods is ready to go or even close, I think they probably throw him out there just because they're going to, and it'd be nice to have him back. That'll settle things down. And, maybe we get a real playoff Jimmy performance tomorrow without Steph because, number one, they'll need it. And number two, I think he likes going against Giannis. I think that much is obvious from just watching them in the playoffs over the past 5 years. So even without, that's the really nice thing about this team now is that like, even if they don't have Steph, there still is interest and intrigue. And like, there's still a reason to watch. It's not just going to be like absolutely being dragged through the mud.
Yeah. That's pretty much where I'm at with it too.
All right, let's talk some Via. Light Years Podcast is brought to you by Via. Remember when you could function on 4 hours of sleep? Not really. I wish I remember those days. Yeah, those days are gone.
Yeah, it's
been
a long time since that happened for me.
Long time. But don't worry, Via's got something to help you sleep like a log. 500,000 happy customers cannot be wrong. Via is changing the game in natural wellness, combining high-quality hemp-derived ingredients with powerful cannabinoids to create real, effective-driven results, not just fancy packaging and empty promises. Want better sleep, more focus, a little boost in the bedroom, or maybe you just need to chill out because your stress levels are currently at screaming into the void status. Whatever you need, Via has a solution for you. Their products range from 0 milligrams of THC to 100 milligrams of THC. So these guys have you covered whether you're looking to microdose or enjoy more potent effects. So if you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and use the code LETYEARS to receive 15% off and free shipping on any order over 100. And if you're new to Via, you get to get free of choice. All you got to do is select Light Years Podcast in the dropdown and let them know that you heard about them from us, and it is the best way to support our show. And so just tell them that we sent you. So enhance your everyday with Via.
And guys, I'm here to tell you about Timeline. Cellular health is the foundation of well-being and longevity. With MitoPure supplements, you can support your health by encouraging cellular renewal. MitoPure recharges your cells, supporting any goals by helping all your systems work better. With MitoPure, you feel the difference in your energy levels, your workouts, your endurance, and your recovery. MitoPure is the only supplement on the market clinically proven to target the effects of age-related cellular decline. MitoPure is research-backed innovation that unlocks your fullest potential. I've taken MitoPure supplements, and I can tell you, it's been a game changer. My workouts are better. I feel like I have more energy, and I can rest well knowing I'm taking care of my health. It's once a day. It's easy to take. You'll thank me later. Right now, Timeline is offering 10% off your orders of MitoPure. That's right. Go to timeline.com, timeline.com/lightyears. That's timeline.com/lightyears. Let's go, guys. We should talk a little more Jimmy. I do feel like that was kind of to your point, that was kind of the one thing I really enjoyed about today's game, which was the playoff Jimmy preview. It wasn't on the scale of, all right, let me ask you this. I have a number in my head. 0 being emo Jimmy, I want to get out of Miami Jimmy, and 10 being 56 in your face Giannis, like hyped out of his mind playoff Jimmy. Where are we at right now? What was tonight?
I was about a 6. Right, about a
Okay.
6, maybe a 7. And more just focusing on the second half, really. You could just, I mean, it was palpable. The level
Mhm.
of energy. Like, obviously, you talked about that block he had in the third quarter coming from the weak side. He had that play where he dove on the floor, got the loose ball off of a Warriors missed shot, tipped it over to Moody. Moody dove on the floor too. And just it's always very obvious with Jimmy because like there is so much intentionality and thought behind the way that he plays basketball. Like we were talking about earlier today offline, like he's every dad's favorite player just because like
Yes.
he plays the game the right way. You know what I mean? But he really does. Like he has a very, and Kerr's talked about this ad nauseum already. Like he has a very old school approach to basketball. Like it's all about footwork and timing and like taking advantage of little cracks in the defense. He's not the most skilled guy. He really isn't. Like doesn't have like a beautiful jumper. Like it's not terrible, but it's not great. He doesn't have like the craziest handle, but
Kind of
like
a line drive.
yeah, and he doesn't have the craziest handle. It's a very functional handle, you know.
Sure.
But it's not like it's not flashy. It's all substance, no flash. But that's really what his game is. But it's always very obvious when he's deciding that he needs to take over a little bit, and he's done it in like fits and spurts. But I think that was the longest we've seen it for in any game so far, and not that I really had any real concerns, but it was nice to see it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
he still does have that level in him because you don't really know until you see it. But I thought he was excellent tonight. I thought he was pretty clearly the best player. Him and Draymond. Draymond was really good too for the most part. But yeah, that is what they will need at least once or twice in a playoff series, and maybe even more than that. So it was really nice to just see it like come to fruition like it did.
Yeah, I'd go at 6.5. 6.5 to 7 on the playoff Jimmy scale. I think he showed you what he was capable of, but there's still a bit of, I want to feel this out. I'm going to get the ball to Steph. I'm going to see what Kuminga has. It wasn't like code red, full playoff Jimmy. I got to take over this thing right now type of thing. But yeah, no, I mean, it is it cracks me up that he has a diva reputation because he has the most hard hat game of any like star in the league. Like he's not flashy. Everything he does is about being like smart, physical, and just knowing the game better. It has nothing to do with like, 3 crossovers has he, like that sort of thing. Yeah, I think he gave them multiple opportunities to get back into this game. He ignited multiple runs and they just couldn't take it home. It's just kind of how it goes. It's a long season. They look fatigued. Like, yeah, it's a bad loss. Like I just keep going back to this, but for me, it's if anything, for me, a game like this is like, can we just get to the playoffs already? I'm like ready. I'm ready at like the number one thing I want is these guys to just get to the playoffs healthy because I'm actually not that concerned. I haven't seen anything that specifically concerns me. I just want to see them get there fully healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of getting there fully healthy is like Jimmy not playing like this all the time because it does. And I've mentioned this a couple times now since the trade, but the style that he plays, it takes a lot of energy and it's very physical when he's like really getting to the rim and getting to the paint all the time. And that is just not realistic for a 35-year-old for 82 games a year. But the important thing is, can he get to the level? And I thought that was a resounding yes tonight against obviously a depleted Denver team, but a Denver team that also has probably better defensive personnel without Jokic and Murray out there. They were very switchable. They are still big and physical. They're smart, obviously. Like, there's a reason that they are considered a contender. And I'm not entirely sure they're like a top tier contender. I've watched more Denver over the past couple weeks, and there's definitely some concerning stuff. Like the bench isn't great. Murray's super inconsistent. They can't really like Gordon's been in and out of the lineup. Like there's a lot of reasons to maybe doubt them as like a top flight contender. But at the end of the day, that is a team that has a good culture and like they know how to play winning basketball.
Mhm.
And the fact that Jimmy was able to raise his level against a team that's that smart and that sound, it was really encouraging, and that's why among many reasons. I think that's why it's hard to come away from this game just taking all negatives, because we saw some stuff that is encouraging and enlightening and makes me like optimistic still heading towards the playoffs.
What do you think of this point from the chat? Teams are going to start adjusting and forcing Jimmy to prove he can score. Teams have been guarding him as if he's a threat to score 40.
I mean, if you don't guard him like that, then he goes and gets layups. So, I mean, there's a reason why he is guarded like that. And he just knows how to read a defense. And yeah, he's definitely a little bit too deferential at times. Like it can be frustrating, but at the end of the day, he's talked about it in post-game interviews. He did after the Knicks game. He's like, I don't care if I score 10 points or 40 points. He's like, when I need to score, you guys will see it. I'll still be able to do it. But I think that's basically what he said to Slater, right? Like it was something along those lines. And yeah, I have no doubts that he can do that. But just to answer that point directly, if you don't guard him like that, he will slice you and dice you up. But that's why, he's such a good playmaker, because when he does see those overloaded coverages, he's able to dissect a defense. He's pretty good at finding cutters. He's obviously really good at kicking out to shooters. And he wants to get everybody involved. He really doesn't care about how many points he scores. But again, I have zero doubts that he'll be able to do that in a playoff series. Whereas before it was like, maybe he's just old and he doesn't really have that level anymore. But I thought it was super obvious he does.
I think so too. I haven't seen, like I said, the only question I have about tonight is, all right, can we keep Steph healthy? Because this was a game where he just looked gassed. He didn't look particularly good. And if he can't play up to the level we've seen the last 2 months, let's be real, none of this matters. So I guess the only thing, but even that, I'm willing to be like, man, he's old. Old guys have off nights here and there. So it is what it is. Just quick before we get out of here, let's do a little standings conversation. All right. Missed opportunity for the Warriors, but they still have a game on the Timberwolves in the 6th seed here. 14 games left for them. I mean, do you actually think it's possible for them to catch up to the pack of teams who are ahead of them, or is it really just going to be a fight about 6, 7 seed for them?
I know. I think 4 is possible. I think it's likely. No. What people have to remember with the situation with the Timberwolves here is the T-Wolves essentially have to be 2 games better than the Warriors for the rest of the season, because the Warriors do own that tiebreaker,
Right.
the head-to-head tiebreaker. So it's one loss in the loss column right now, but essentially it's 2 losses in a way, because the Warriors won the season series 2-1. I would be less optimistic about the Warriors getting up to 5 if they didn't have another matchup with Memphis, but they do right at the beginning of April. So, you can essentially flip in the standings one game. That's why it would have been nice to get Denver tonight, because you could have knocked them down to 26 losses as well. So that's, I think, the most disappointing part about tonight. But who knows how long LeBron's out for? If he's out for another week or 2, Lakers won tonight, but they're playing a really depleted, tanking Spurs team. And they have Denver again during this current stretch of games. They have Milwaukee again during this stretch of games. They can definitely lose a couple more over the next week and a half. So is it likely they get to 5 or 4? No, I don't think so. But it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility, because they do have one more matchup against the Grizzlies and the Lakers.
Here's a better question for you. What win total do they need to get to avoid the play-in?
48, 49. I'd say 48 is probably the absolute floor, and it might take 50 to stay out of the play-in. I mean, just because Minnesota's schedule is so bad, like they really might go 12-2 to end the season with the host of teams that they're playing.
10-2, but yes.
10-2, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say 48 as well, but you might be right. It might take 49 to 50 to avoid it. So 48 wins would mean the Warriors have to finish the season 9-5, which feels very doable given their schedule in general. So 10-4. Yeah, I mean, they still kind of control their own destiny here. What a brutal West. Like, I could absolutely see the scenario, to your point. Like, I can see where head's going with it. I can see a scenario where 7 teams win 50 games, which would be very tough, because winning 50 games and not avoiding the play-in just sucks. Like, you can't really do anything about it. You win 50 games, you usually feel good that you avoid the play-in, and you're clearly in the playoffs, but sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, I think the play-in has overall been a net positive for the league. Like, it generates more interest, and I was kind of lukewarm on the idea when it first happened, but I also do think there should be like a if the 9 and the 10 are separated by a certain amount of games at the end of the season, they should not really get an opportunity to like make the playoffs. Like we see this in the East every year, where like the 9 seed will be like 8 games back of the 8 seed, and they have a chance to make the playoffs. And some of that you can argue is like, okay, it's a little bit more tightly compacted this year. Something that you could argue is, well, teams get injured during the season, and one of their main guys is out for 2 months. This gives them a chance to kind of resurrect their season by getting fully healthy by the play-in, and then you can fight your way in. But at the same time, like sometimes like injuries happen and you just have the season from hell. Like if Sacramento ends up with what? Let's say they end up with 42 wins and the Clippers have 49 and the Kings have a chance to make the playoffs over the Clippers. That just doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. I'm just looking at this. We're going to be doing this every pod the rest of the way forward. Like, I can't see any way in which this separates before the last day. All the teams play basically at the same time on that last Sunday. And just based on where this is going, I can't see any way in which we're not like every game counts the entire way through. So that's where we're at. So that's why tonight sucks. That's in many ways, you're not going to win them all and you're going to lose some, but losing this one just really fucking sucks. So,
yeah. And I mean, the schedule is after the Milwaukee game tomorrow. The schedule is easy for the rest of March for the Warriors, but the April schedule is pretty tough. It's mostly playoff teams, West playoff teams. They don't really have to travel much, which is nice. They don't go any further west than I want to say Phoenix. Like that's their longest road trip after the beginning of April. So that's really nice. But at the same time, like they play the Grizzlies, they play the Lakers, they play the Clippers the last game of the season. I want to say they have the Kings potentially one more time. So like it's a tougher schedule to end, and you're playing a team that's a game below you in the standings the last game of the year. They're probably, at the very least, probably going to be 2 games back and maybe only 1 game. So that last game could legitimately be deciding whether you're in the play-in or whether you're, a top 6 seed.
we'll see. I say we end it there. We'll be back tomorrow night. Appreciate everyone.
Thanks, everybody.